The honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Without pay equity, women are robbed of an estimated 23% of their earnings. And this government is an accomplice to that robbery. 13 years have passed since the 2004 Pay Equity Task Force report. It was a comprehensive blueprint for pay equity. It was a 3-year study on a proactive pay equity regime, 596 pages, 113 recommendations, and let me say again, that was 2004, when the Liberal government was previously in power. If those recommendations had been implemented in 2004, women would have had $640 billion more in their pockets, money that they are now owed. $640 billion is what the wage gap has cost Canadian women in lost wages since 2004. Now imagine for a moment if the improved quality of life women would have had if they hadn't had to wait. Imagine the boost to the economy if that money had been in their bank accounts or being spent in our communities that whole time. As Barb Byers, Secretary-Treasurer of the Canadian Labour Congress, very recently retired, thank you, Barb, as she testified to the committee that just held hearings just last year, a year ago, she said, quote, "Let us also be mindful that women have been waiting for longer than 13 years. We've been waiting for decades and decades, and while we wait, the debt owed to those who are caught in the wage gap continues to mount. These are women with children to raise, women who deserve a dignified retirement, and many are women who face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination both in the workplace and in the community." End quote. Now, in June 2016, almost a year ago, the Special Committee on Pay Equity, created by a New Democrat motion, tabled a report called, quote, "It's time to act." But this government has decided not to act. It's not a hard fix. There's no reason for the delay. Women are still being denied pay equity. We have models and best practices right within our country. Proactive pay equity legislation for public sectors for several decades, Ontario since 1987 and Quebec since 1996. Now, those regimes also include the private sector. And Ontario and Quebec have found that the cost of these provincial proactive pay equity laws was not significant and not as costly as employers had originally feared when the regimes were introduced. Plus, it's a human right. It's the right thing to do. This year, the Liberals sent a delegation to the 61st Commission on the Status of Women. Interestingly, its focus was hashtag stop the robbery. Hashtag pay equity was everywhere. The United Nations has asked all countries to hashtag stop the robbery, but justice has not happened in Canada. And we've just learned through the media that a senior ministerial staffer to the former employment minister lost classified documents going to cabinet explaining why pay equity legislation is still being hung up. So I want to know through the Speaker, when will the government table this lost document so we can learn what possible excuse the government has for failing to deny women legal pay equity?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me say to the member from Nanaimo Ladysmith, first of all, I respect her dedication and passion to this issue. She did give a shout out to Barb Byers, someone who I've worked with over the last 5 or 6 years, and a person who, an advocate who I have tremendous amount of respect for and appreciate her body of work over the period of time on the national scene, and she's done a great job. I was speaking with a good friend of mine, Jillian Hansen, about this just before we came to the House today. And in speaking on, in preparation, we agreed it was important to make one thing clear, that pay equity is not a point of contention. Our government agrees that women should receive equal pay for work of equal value. Excuse me, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker. It's a human right that's entrenched in the Canadian Human Rights Act our government shares the member's determination and commitment. I'd like to assure the honourable members in the House that our government is not delaying this initiative, quite to the contrary. Our government has committed to table new proactive pay equity legislation for the federal jurisdiction in 2018. We are proud of bringing forward legislation after years of inaction from the previous government. This commitment is explicitly outlined in the minister's mandate letter, and work is underway to achieve this goal. Pay equity between men and women and fair treatment of all workers in the workplace is going to create economic growth and a thriving middle class. Our government has had discussions with provinces to draw upon their experiences and lessons learned. And we've begun targeted consultations with stakeholders to hear their views on the design of a new, proactive pay equity regime. But the bottom line is we need to create comprehensive and effective proactive pay equity legislation. This will address gender-based wage discrimination related to the undervaluation of work traditionally performed by women. Our commitment to this goal, Mr. Speaker, is unwavering. In addition, I should mention that to the future pay equity legislation, the government will be working to reduce the wage gap between men and women. We'll also work to increase the number of women in senior leadership roles and the representation of women in good, quality jobs in skilled trades. Gender equality is high on our government's agenda. As outlined in Budget 2017, we are committed to ensuring that every Canadian has a real and fair chance to succeed. We will make sure that our decisions deliver results that are more equitable and more fair for all Canadians. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
There was not a single witness at the Pay Equity Commission that was held last year at the special committee that asked for more consultation, that asked for more time. It was the unanimous recommendation of the committee that this government table legislation in June 2017. That's like 2 weeks away. There's not a single excuse to delay. And so I repeat my question to the member opposite. Why on earth are you waiting? $640 billion is a big debt. You're just building it. And can we please see this lost document, which is now out somewhere in the public domain, the one that was lost by the former employment minister's staff, explaining to Cabinet why on earth the government would be betraying its promise to Canadian women and delaying pay equity legislation once again.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, the member should know, I think Canadians know, that we are absolutely fully committed to moving forward on tabling proactive pay equity legislation by the end of 2018 and work toward that date. Our government highly values women's rights, and in keeping with those principles of equality and fairness, equal pay for work of equal value is a human right. We are actively working towards the goal of pay equity to address gender-based wage discrimination for women in the workplace. Pay equity legislation will impact different organizations in different ways. As such, we must be mindful of these complexities and create legislation that is both comprehensive and effective. That is our goal, and I assure you, Mr. Speaker, make no mistake, we will achieve it.